The Simone Feiler Podcast, giving authors a platform. Welcome to the podcast.
G'day there, Simone Feiler. Meredith Wilson is a culture strategist, speaker and executive mentor with over 20 years experience. She helps leaders shape and shift organisational culture during growth, acquisition and transformations, amongst other times. Known for her pragmatic approach, she's worked with global teams and ASX 20 organisations, and I've been fortunate enough to have spent the last few days with Meredith narrating her work to me in shift. How lucky am I? Welcome to the Simone Feiler Podcast,
Thank
Meredith.
Thank you.
It's great to chat today. So first and foremost, of course, how did you find all of that, narrating your audiobook?
It was good. I found it really interesting. When I first wrote the book, it got to a point I didn't want to see it again. And I think this process of reading it aloud has helped me really fall back in love with it. Aww, so it's been good.
That's awesome.
And I'm in the middle of writing my next book, as you know. And so even just noticing some strengths or some great things in this book, I've gone, I really need to think about how I integrate that into my next book.
Oh, that's fabulous. It's a really different dimension reading it out loud, isn't it, than in your mind?
It is. And my editor had said to me, make sure you read it out loud and record yourself. And of course, by that point, I never wanted to see it again. So I didn't. And we discovered a couple of things together, which was interesting. We've kind of gone, just need to edit that typo. So it's a really good process. And I think it uses a different part of your brain. So you're engaging with the content differently.
Yeah.
So I'm really curious to see what the feedback is from my audience.
Yeah. Well, personally, I think you did a great job. You've got a beautiful voice.
Thanks. Simone.
Really engaging and, no hard sell at all. You're very humble in your delivery and you obviously know your content incredibly well.
Thank you.
So culture is your thing.
It is.
I have found out.
And culture is having a moment still, yes.
Yeah, definitely. But you all started at a very young age, your love for it, with your dad travelling and bringing back mementos. So how did it sort of blossom from there for you?
Oh, look, I think I was always fascinated by the world around me, and I didn't know it had a name, culture, but I really just loved the difference in different countries. I grew up, I've done a lot of travel. I think I've been to more than 75 countries now.
Wow.
I
think I was doing well with my 30.
Well, I had a target or a goal that my dad had sent me of 30 by 30, so 30 countries by 30. And that became a bit of a thing between my brother and sister and I to race for 30 to 30. So
game on, right?
I hit 53 by the time I was 30 years old.
Amazing. And
my brother actually blew me out of the water, and my sister just scraped in with 30. So we're a well-travelled family. Travel's always been a really big part of we've always valued experience over stuff and have kind of collected experiences and memories over the years. And a lot of that's been anchored in, yes, the natural beauty of the world, but also the culture of different nationalities and ethnicities and, just exploring the world. And I didn't actually realise, I didn't know anything about culture inside organisations until I hit my first job. And I was really fortunate that I worked in an organisation that had a great culture and was well known for it globally and had really advanced kind of HR or people teams. I was going to be a diplomat when I grew up. It was, that's kind of, I thought I want to be paid to travel and explore different cultures. I thought that was the only way to do it.
It's so funny, isn't it, when you get like this side of
left
things.
turn, into I guess HR. I'm probably showing my age, but you couldn't study HR when I went to university. So I did economics and history, and I always gravitated to kind of understanding why. I was always curious about why people did things. I love behavioural economics. And then for me, it's about how I was fascinated in how leaders influenced others.
Right.
That particular, that influence that I first, was fascinated with in history.
Was-
And then when I started working, I was fascinated by that in the workplace.
Was that sparked by anyone, a leader in particular, that you think?
Well, unfortunately, it was sparked by Hitler, which
Oh,
was
okay. That's
which
interesting.
was
Oh, that took a turn.
yeah, but it was really I knew all these amazing, well-educated, compassionate, philosophical kind of Germans,
Right.
and I'd spent a lot of time in Switzerland and Germany, and I couldn't understand how this culture had actually done the things that it had during World War II.
Right.
And it was that actually got me into influence.
That's so interesting.
Propaganda and persuasion and fear and all the different things that motivate people to do things they might not ordinarily. So I definitely came in from the dark side because I just couldn't understand why. And I've kind of looked into that a lot.
That's a really interesting topic right now,
Yeah,
particularly.
very much so. So I think that the sway that one person can have over groups of people is what pulled me in.
Right.
And then I've certainly seen all shapes and sizes of leaders in organisations over the last 25 years since then.
Yeah. So you talk about culture and you've written your book, Shift is all about it, but can you, for the listeners, describe culture, workplace culture in a nutshell?
It's more than 25 years since that great Australian movie, The Castle, came out, but I still haven't found a better non-technical definition, which is the vibe, right? I think every human can walk into a room and go, something just happened here. I don't know what, but something's gone down.
Yeah.
So that's really culture. It's intangible, but it is actionable. And, a big driver for me is having worked with so many leaders. Leaders are so busy. They don't have time to sit down and study the science, behind it. So it's like, just tell me what to do. And so I'm really big on making culture simple and actionable for leaders so that they aren't scared. I think there's a bunch of people out there in the culture space who are experts and very knowledgeable, but they either make it too stuffy for people, too academic and too dense and hard to understand. And there's power in that for them because the expert has to be invited in to help the leader. Yeah. But actually, it's so doable. And similarly, there's a bunch of people who work in the culture space who want you to go drumming and in the forest and do trust falls, and that's just too fluffy for most leaders. And so it's like, how do we make culture simple and actionable? And so I've done a lot of work to just break it down into I know culture is important. I know that I need to do culture, but how do I do culture and where do I start?
Yeah. What sort of background, did you draw on to actually decide that you're going to implement that and help businesses?
Well, it's interesting. So I was in executive and board roles for many years, and I bounced out of corporate about 3 or 4 years ago. And when I was thinking about what I wanted to do next, and I thought back over all the work that I'd loved and all of the really impactful times, and what was the common threads, and it was culture and leadership. So yes, I can lead a payroll remediation project if you really want me to, but
not your passion.
No, and culture, I think, is just so influential on people's everyday. I really feel like if we can get that right, it makes a whole bunch of other stuff go right. You can have a perfect strategy, but if you don't have the culture right, as the saying goes, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Yeah. If you don't invest in the culture, it's not going to land. It's not going to happen.
When do you think it all sort of started playing out that culture was actually a thing in workplace?
Well, I think the experts have been talking about culture for a long time. 3-4 decades we've been talking about engagement. We've been talking about the culture, and sometimes it used to be called climate. Inside organisations. But as the world has got more complex and work is I guess, evolving into more knowledge work rather than manufacturing-based work, which is physical work. You've got people working in intangibles. And so as we've kind of honed what and understood more about what shapes performance and what gets in the way of performance, this kind of catch-all thing, has been grouped into culture. And, you'll see a lot of headlines about culture. And I think a lot of leaders are in the same boat. They know culture is important. They know it impacts performance. And if you ask them to describe culture, they can usually come up with a 1, 2, 3 lines on what culture is. Mm-hmm. But then when you go to the next stage of, okay, but then, what will you do about that? That's when they'll stumble. And the news headlines rarely go past culture. They might say bad apples, a group of bad apples, but even in a lot of the inquiries and scandals recently in culture, they talk about tone from the top, or they might talk about a culture of blame, or a lack of safety in the culture, or toxic cultures.
Yeah.
But they don't really get down to the root cause. And unless you change the system and actually change the culture, we're going to repeat those failures and repeat those symptoms, if you like, and that behaviour. So it is interesting. It's having a moment. I think people recognise its importance, but there's a long way to go for people to understand what it is to be able to action it.
That's probably more on the leaders' sort of side of things. One of the statistics in your book, you mentioned that culture is so important in the workplace nowadays that it almost 80% of workers consider a company's culture when looking for a job. That's insane. And nearly 50% of employees would leave their current job for less money to go and work at a place that's got a better culture.
Yeah.
That's crazy. A very powerful stat, obviously. Why do you think culture holds so much weight in today's workforce? And do you think it's become more prevalent since COVID, maybe?
Oh, I think people are more aware of...
I just don't know because I'm not in the workforce.
Yeah, I think people are more aware of it and talking about it more, but I still don't know that they know what to do about it. Even the candidates that say, I want to choose a place based on its culture, they might ask in the interview, what's the culture like? And leaders will describe it, but how do they know?
Yeah.
And even the people that are in the culture, they just know it's not right, but they can't actually describe it to be able to fix it.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the big gaps we need to close.
Okay, so you've got the way forward. Well, you're honing in your skills to the way forward with GRASS.
Yeah, I think the reason I came up with GRASS was to try and give leaders a simple set of things that they could focus on. And also, has it been this sense of culture is someone else's job? It's a bad culture. Well, what are you doing to contribute to that? And that's
everybody, isn't it?
That's right. Everyone in the workplace contributes to culture. And ironically, even your customers and clients and stakeholders contribute to your culture. The nature of the work you do influences the culture and the kinds of people that are attracted to that workplace. So it's pretty multifaceted. But I think the GRASS model came out of just trying to give leaders somewhere to start and somewhere they didn't have to wait for an HR initiative to come out or for the board to roll out a new set of values. You can work on your culture without kind of a big project inside your organisation. And if the culture is around you is kind of going pear-shaped, you can definitely influence and create a bit of an island of a culture in your team. So GRASS stands for gatherings, rituals, actions, symbols and stories, which are all things that, the research tells us have a greater impact on culture than other things. So there are 3 other things which, you don't need me to tell you that first impressions count.
Yeah,
right?
definitely.
That's certainly in the workplace as well. And when things are going well and when things aren't going well, you think about any human relationship. Those are 2 kind of moments of truth. So they certainly influence culture. But when you want to go beyond that and go, but what can I do to actually deliberately shape the culture that I want and then take the actions to shift towards it, that's where grass really comes into play.
Yeah.
So grass is because I know what it's like when you're a busy leader. You don't have time to remember stuff, and there's only so many Post-it notes you can stick around your monitor. So grass was meant to be really easy to remember. So gatherings is like anytime you're bringing people together. Meetings, online, in person, but it could be social events, could be one-on-ones. So anytime you're bringing people together. Rituals, I think, are really undercooked, really undervalued.
Well, we had a very interesting conversation because I'm thinking, I wonder what kind of rituals that you'd use in your workplace. And, I mean, we had the conversation about the birthday cake and how that's a ritual. It's like you don't even realise that half these things we do are actually rituals.
Yeah.
Never mind in businesses, but just even in your everyday life.
Well, one of the examples I use to help people understand the difference between what's just something you do and a ritual is lighting a candle. So we lost power recently in the storms that came through, Alfie, and I don't know if you
Alfie.
did.
I was luckily overseas.
Of course you
having
were.
the most beautiful weather in the UK.
Well, we lost power and, I'm not really a candle kind of girl, but I had to scramble, around the house to try and find some candles. When you light a candle because the power's gone out or it's dark and you need light, that's just a task.
Yeah.
But when we light a candle to celebrate someone's birthday or to remember someone by, that's a ritual. It's the same thing that we're doing. So what's different? Well, the difference is the meaning that we attribute to it. Yeah. And so leaders can really turn anything that they're doing regularly, either individually or with their teams, into a ritual by just a bit of deliberate design to go, how do I make this more special? How do I add meaning? So I think rituals are they're really powerful for you as a leader.
Yeah.
And then they're really powerful in creating a sense of community and belonging and connection in a team as well.
Yeah, and you've got some good examples in Shift. And then after rituals, there's...
Actions, yeah. So I think most leaders are aware that, people are watching them and they're expected to have be a role model of the culture that you want. But I think we don't really spend enough time as leaders reflecting on what we did and the consequences of our actions, perhaps the unintended consequences of our actions. And there's a real opportunity to shift out of default into really deliberate actions, and knowing that particularly in times of uncertainty or change or challenge, people are really looking to the leader to know how to respond and what to do.
Yeah.
And so as a leader, you don't have to say something. They're watching what you do.
Yeah. Yeah, and they know when you don't do it right.
Yeah, and hopefully they'll tell you.
Or they'll talk about it.
Or not just tell each other. That's right.
That's a bad culture, right?
Well, it depends. It depends.
And then there's symbols.
Yeah, so symbols is an interesting one. It's a bit like rituals.
Yeah.
So, our brains are actually wired for symbol. And it's like a pre-language. It's a language that's kind of pre-written words, and our kind of mind is always observing what's kind of going on. We say a picture is worth 1,000 words.
Yeah.
But, I joke in the book about fridges and car parks.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up.
And, it's amazing when I go in and do a culture audit and I'm looking for symbols of what the culture is. One of the things I'm looking at is all of the signage around the place. Right. And not just the official posters on the walls, but the signs on the back of toilet doors. Are they like, please, something, something, or are they don't, or on fridges.
Yeah.
If there's like
don't eat my
lunch, or, if it's not
mine.
Anything here at 3 p.m. on Friday is going to be thrown out. Just the language that's used when people talk to each other and the message that sends. Mm-hmm. Even just the symbol of who gets a car park or who gets the corner office, there's a lot in that. And they really give clues to our culture.
Yeah. And finally?
Stories.
Yeah.
Storytelling.
Yeah.
And culture's been passed down through storytelling for thousands and thousands of years.
By every generation, was every people.
Every population, every culture has shared what matters most, what the rules of belonging are, what's acceptable and unacceptable. We tell stories about heroes and villains. We have all these myths and legends. Yeah. They exist in the workplace as well. Yeah. You think about the stories that are told to someone when they first start about what it's like to work here, like the unofficial orientation. Yeah. There are incredible stories, and some stories live on for a long time. So I think for leaders, it's about what are the stories that you want told? What are the stories that you're sharing? How do you shift from playground stories to playbook stories?
Yeah, and the difference between those is remarkable as well.
Yeah, you said water coolers before, but, gossip, rumour, in the absence of kind of information, people make up their own stories. Yeah. So the more stories you're sharing as a leader, that there's less room or space for kind of rumour and myth. I think, too, stories are stickier. I
love
say
that
kind
concept. I only really, sort of towards the end of the book, stickier is obviously they stick.
Yeah.
But I like the way you use that.
It's, much better than bullet points. I always say bullet points don't change culture. PowerPoints don't change culture. People do. Yeah. But it's stories that people will remember and share. And I think, we're much more aware of that now with meme culture and what's shareable, or Instagrammable, what's TikTok worthy. So we're much more educated and savvy now, I think, about stories. But that means your listeners are more educated and savvy as well. So
yeah, definitely.
I think
especially
in Australia and in Australia and New Zealand, we've got a pretty good BS
right
detector,
there, right?
Yeah, very strong BS detector. So it's not about storytelling as making stuff up, but it is about being deliberate about the kinds of stories you share and the stories you share about each other.
Yeah. And the story behind your the business itself, I guess, and how that evolves.
The origin story. Yeah. Everyone loves a good origin story. Yeah. Everyone loves a comeback story, you know. So there's lots of stories out there that you can leverage as a leader to really kind of reinforce the culture that you want.
Yeah, tell us a bit more about the comeback stories and the origin stories.
I think if you're a leader, they say the number one thing that you can do to impact psychological safety in your team is by sharing a story about a time that you made a mistake and what you learned. And the comeback story is about the story of redemption of what you learned. It's not I stuffed up and I was forgiven. It's I stuffed up, I learned something, I took steps, and that's where my redemption came from. But, whether you're sharing like a career clanger in a one-on-one to make someone feel better about a time, that when they've made a mistake, you share when you've made a mistake, or you stand up and share with your whole team. But that just telling a story about a time you made a mistake gives your team permission to be open about their own mistakes and see that that it's about learning. And that it's not that failure is acceptable, it's that we all make mistakes, we're all human, we learn and grow. Yeah. That's, the only mistake is we don't learn and grow.
Exactly, and that's the only way to really grow, isn't it? And learn by making mistakes.
Yeah, that's right.
I remember back in the day, some of the bosses I worked for shouting at you, and I expect that doesn't go on so much nowadays.
Well, I wish we could say it doesn't.
Okay. Well, you'd have more insight to that sort of thing. Do you think it's getting better?
Oh, it's definitely getting better. Absolutely. And it's almost like the mainstream that would now be an exception, but it absolutely still exists. Right. And I think leaders are under more pressure now than they've ever been before with the complexity and pace of change. So just having a really clear focus on, these 5 things are the things that matter most. Gatherings, rituals, actions, symbols, and stories. If I can just do that, I can significantly shift my culture without worrying about the 100 things on the laundry list.
So leaders listening today, do you think they would just recognise that they do have a culture issue at their workplace, or they'd like to improve their culture? How do they recognise these?
Well, everyone's got a culture. Yeah. It's really about whether you've done it deliberately or not. But we've all got cultures, and I think too, recognising that there's no such thing as a monoculture. Well, there is. It's called a cult. But if you're feeling like your culture is different to the culture of the teams around you, That's okay. Focus on what you have that's shared across the whole organisation. But it's okay for healthy, dynamic subcultures to exist within a broader, healthy culture. But every leader has a culture in their team. So there's more than two people. Yeah. The space between them is filled with relationship and culture. Yeah. So it's probably more a question about, is the culture working for you, or is your culture working against you? And there are lots of culture experts that will, have books that are about, this is the kind of culture you need. I don't do that. I don't go there, because each organisation needs a unique culture that's fit for purpose, fit for context for them. Yeah. This is really about saying, you think about the culture that you want and choose it and what that looks like. Yeah. And then start shifting deliberately to do more of that more often.
So you can work towards a culture that you really want in your workplace.
Yeah, they're dynamics. You think about a time when you've been in a team and one person has left, or one person has joined,
it changes.
And the amount of difference that makes in just a team environment.
Very much so.
Cultures are constantly changing and shifting. It's really more about, are you shaping it on purpose, or are you just letting it happen around you?
That's actually shaping people then, isn't it? That's where it comes down to.
I think people shape themselves. I think you can invite someone to make a change. I don't know that you can change them. It's, if you think of it more as the way that people come together and interact, that's probably where culture lies, rather than the individual. The leader, I've definitely got some things for the leader to think about their own leadership, but culture itself is more about the collective.
Yeah. Very insightful. How good it is, Meredith, and incredibly humble. What do you want people to actually take away from listening to Shift?
I think just feeling confident that they can make a change, that culture isn't something scary that isn't for them, that actually you can take steps, that you can change culture, you can change it to something that works for you, and that it's simple and actionable.
You've made a career out of making culture simple and actionable. You've been doing it for over 20 years, especially during times of high pressure like transformations, acquisitions and downturns. Can you share a moment when you saw culture like truly shift in a way that surprised even you?
I think COVID was a collective shared experience, right? And if I think back to the organisations that responded better in those first initial weeks of fear and crazy, when no one really knew what to expect, and all strategies and plans were thrown out, it was the organisations that had strong, great, positive, constructive cultures that all kind of came together and just sorted stuff out. Yeah. They weren't necessarily waiting for direction from the top, but what they were doing was aligned with what the leaders, would have chosen to do. They just got on and, sorted themselves out, fixed things. They weren't complaining about things or fighting and resisting. They just leaned into it and did whatever it took. Contrast that with organisations that were more tightly controlled and directive, and cultures that didn't allow a lot of space for people to bring their best thinking or best selves. They tried to control their way through chaos rather than culture their way through chaos. And I think the best cultures fill in the gaps between strategies and plans. And I think the best cultures will take you further than your strategy can ever imagine, because your strategy can't anticipate. You think about it this way: a strategy is a gamble; it's a bet on what the future will be, and you can't know what's around the corner, but you can create capacity and readiness in your organisation through culture and leadership, so that whatever comes, you're ready and you'll respond in a way that's constructive and positive and productive.
Is that almost giving the employees a little bit of leadership, leeway in the culture?
I think the best cultures allow autonomy and choice for team members. When people have a sense of connection to the work that they're doing and the purpose of the organisation, and they have a sense of autonomy and control over what they do and how they do it, the more control they have over what they do and how they do it, the more engaged, the more productive they are. When you say, here's the rule book, and, there's 800 pages of it, there is no scope for you to really bring your thinking or problem solving or anything about who you are. Yeah. It's just show up and do the work. You might as well have robots or machines. And so you're not kind of making the best of the people that you've got. And I always think that the best businesses grow people, and then those people grow the business.
What about you? You've reached a 40% gender balance in leadership at a mining operation. That's an incredible milestone. Congratulations.
Thank you.
That's huge.
Yeah, we won all kinds of awards for that one.
It
feels like a long time ago now too. It was probably more than 10 years ago that we did that.
Okay, well, that's innovation for you.
You
said something there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It was really powerful.
Yeah. What was some of the biggest challenges of firstly embarking and then actually achieving that?
Look, when I arrived, I was the only woman in the top 3 layers of the organisation. So they didn't really know what to do with me. And, when I visited the mine site, there were women across the organisation. But they'd never been in a room together. So I invited them all together in a room, and they walked in going, oh, actually there's more of us than we thought. I think there were 57.
Right.
I spoke to every one of them. And I heard things like, there's no bathrooms in the area that I work. I have to drive 20 minutes to go to a bathroom.
That's insane.
There are bathrooms, but only for men. There are no bathrooms for women. No maternity wear options in the uniforms. So in an environment where you have to wear uniforms for safety, and they are, provided by the organisation. I had really petite women who were size 10 having to wear a men's extra large, which was baggy on them in every other way, and they had to roll up the sleeves
and
just
get
to kind
caught
of
in
go over their
machinery
belly,
or whatever,
which isn't safe.
No.
So little things like that. It actually, you couldn't buy maternity wear.
That's crazy.
From our uniform suppliers at the time. So we actually encouraged them to provide it. So, it was definitely early in the gender balance kind of challenges in mining. BHP have just hit 50%
how good's that?
gender balance, which is extraordinary. Yeah.
You must feel a little bit proud given that you've done this 10 years ago and it was very innovative and probably, started, maybe this effect, the roll-on effect that this is now a thing.
Yeah, look, everyone was trying at the time.
You've become an overnight success in 10 years. You know that. That's what happens with rock stars. You did it.
Yeah, look,
you made the movement.
It was a team effort, and I was fortunate to work with some really amazing leaders in the operation, and certainly across the whole organisation. They actually hired me on purpose to help them effect that change. So it wasn't like I got in there to try and said you need to do this. They wanted to do it. And they knew that they needed to invite someone with different thinking into the organisation to help them really break the mould.
Yeah, well, congratulations.
Thank you. It feels like a long time ago, that one.
Yeah. Well, obviously, all of what you've done has brought you here today, including that particular thing,
It is interesting when you look back over the threads of your life to kind of go...
I know, right? How they got you here.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
You never know that when you're
That's
young.
right, when you're in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you always wonder, why am I doing this? Sometimes you wonder, why am I doing this? But when you look back, you're like, well, that's why.
Yeah.
But how insightful is Meredith? You can engage Meredith to talk to your teams as well about culture. She's very humble, considerate, mindful, and these are just some of the characteristics that I've picked up in the last few days working
Thanks,
with you,
Simone.
Meredith. You're beautiful. You do talk about heroes in your book and people that you look up to, you know, that set good examples and whatnot, but who are some of your heroes that
Oh, gosh.
you can tell us about?
Well, it's funny, you know, I spent a lot of my career making leaders look good. And for some, that was a bigger gap to close than others.
Yeah.
It's a bit like the Wizard of Oz seeing behind the curtain.
Right.
And so I'm always really conscious that when we put someone on a pedestal, they're human. And so by making one person, you know, this infallible, perfect hero, we're really always setting ourselves up for disappointment.
Yeah.
So I try and really humanize heroes, and I have so many people that I admire. It's probably hard to kind of call out any one particular one, but I've worked with some amazing leaders over the years who've given me lots of opportunities and lots of leeway to try some different things. I've worked with some amazing people in my team who have followed me from one organisation to another or one team to another, which I'm really grateful for. I have to say one of my heroes at the moment is my practice manager, Kelly. She is just extraordinary. Makes sure I turn up where I need to be and show up how I need to show up. When I didn't find her in a conventional way. Have you seen the show Suits, the TV show Suits?
I haven't watched it. One of my daughters has and says I should, but I haven't had a chance.
So Harvey has this incredible EA called Donna, who just magically knows everything and, is kind of sassy and has a great attitude and, they have a great dynamic. And so I put a post on LinkedIn and said, I'm looking for my Donna.
Awesome.
Here's what I'm kind of looking for and, here's what I'll offer. If you know someone who could be my Donna or you could be my Donna, please get in touch. And a heap of people responded, and I just worked my way through the list. The first person was a friend that I had worked with 15 years prior, and she said, I know just the person. And so I reached out to her, and that was Kelly. And we had coffee, and I knew, and, we've been working together since.
Yeah.
So,
well, I met Kelly. She surprised
That's right.
me. So, because we had a Zoom meeting to begin with, and that was before I went on holiday, so it'd been some time, and then Kelly rocked up at the door, and I was like, oh, that doesn't look like Meredith. I was like, she said, it's Kelly. I'm coming here to greet Meredith, so to make her feel welcome coming into the studio. I thought, that's such a good PA.
Yeah, that was amazing.
You, ready with her camera
That's
and
right.
video.
I was completely surprised.
What a rock star.
She is extraordinary. And I think, if we broaden our definition of heroes to actually amazing people doing amazing things, there are a lot of people around us who are heroes.
Yeah, very well put. Everyone's a hero in their own way,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
Yeah. So Meredith is the CEO of The People Game, where she simplifies culture and leadership. She's worked with executive CEOs and leadership teams to shape, shift, strengthen and lead cultures. She's also co-authored the 2014 Queensland Male Champions of Change report, Changing the Game. She was also a founding member of the Australian Veterans Employers Coalition, which she chaired between 2018 and 2020. Not only the author of Shift, the one we've just done, Everyday Actions Leaders Can Take to Shift Culture, soon to be released in audiobook format after our last few days.
Yes, that's right. Here it is.
There it is.
Nice, bright.
Yeah,
Yep.
It's awesome. You're also the author of the upcoming Leader Shift, which is coming out soon.
Yes.
Can we have a sneak peek about what that's about?
Firstly,
do you sleep? You don't?
Not enough.
What the heck? That's amazing.
Leadership is the 5 pivotal shifts for leading in the now and next of work. So it's really thinking about what are the things that we can do today that will make sure that we are better placed for tomorrow, whatever that brings.
Yeah, awesome. Looking forward to the release. Is it imminent?
It'll be this year, yes.
Well, you've got more things to think about now since you've just narrated that, and it's refreshed in your memory.
That was perfect timing. Perfect timing.
But you're also a public speaker and facilitator of changing your life experiences, or recollecting where you are in your life. You were telling me next week you're going on a journey to New Zealand. I want to get in your suitcase so badly.
So I do a retreat for women in leadership in Queenstown in May every year. And it's really just about taking time out, particularly for women who are in big gigs and who don't have a lot of capacity, often have busy lives at home and outside of work as well as at work, and just to create some space, get away and just find their clarity, a sense of calm, and to connect with other amazing women who are in similar kind of roles. So we just take a week out. We do activities, exploration, discussions, conversations in the morning, and then we do adventures in the afternoon. So I was telling you, we're jumping in a helicopter one of the days and, flying up to a mountaintop and just blowing our minds. So I think it's really important to get out of your day job and just expand your perspective about what's possible, and you come back changed and ready to kind of go again.
Yeah, sounds amazing.
It's one of my favourite things to do.
Yeah. How long have you been doing it for?
Oh, ever since I left corporate. I basically was looking for it when I was in big executive roles and couldn't find anything that I wanted to do. So it was one of the first things I started when I left.
Oh, that sounds so, needed for me, just quietly. I've been through a harrowing event, as you know now, so went overseas and then had a lump on my lip come up, and it transpires it was cancer. I had to get it cut out so you can see the change. But it makes you reevaluate everything. And
it does.
While I love my business, I think going on something like this would be amazing and very grounding and insightful to have a look at, what's next maybe.
We just don't take time out.
Yeah.
And I think you really need space to be able to think and give you perspective. Yeah. There's a lot of neuroscience around what our brain needs to think creatively and to get that clarity. It's so important. And just to look forward and kind of get up out of our everyday.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, you're welcome.
Hey,
come along next year.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it already, just quietly. After you said you go up in a helicopter and land on this mountain, you get out. That sounds huge.
Glass of champagne optional.
I'm sold. I don't mind one or two myself. So obviously you with your leadership and your public speaking as well, and your business and going on this retreat, you've obviously got a website set up so people can find out more about you and how to engage you.
Yeah, meredithwilson.com.au. Okay. Come say hi, and come find me on LinkedIn or on Instagram. It's where I spend a bit of time just having conversations about culture.
I'm going to grab this one more time so we can hold it up. This is the latest release. It's already out in print, so you can get it in print. You can go to Meredith's website, but it's available at all leading online retailers.
Yes,
Amazon.
It is. Yep.
Also as ebook format.
Yes.
And I better get to work very shortly on the edit.
The audiobook.
So you can audiobook it.
Yes.
Coming out very soon, narrated superbly by the author. Thank you so much for doing this with me and chatting on my podcast today.
Thanks, Simone. Thanks so much for having me, and thanks for making this really easy.
My pleasure. It's been really good working with you. Please like the video, share the video to people that might need to hear what Meredith has to say, or engage Meredith indeed for a culture change, culture shift, and subscribe to my channel, the Simone Feiler Podcast, so you can hear other authors' stories. And thanks for listening.
Thank you. Thanks for joining the Simone Feiler Podcast. What's your story? Contact Simone for a chat at brisbaneaudiobookproduction.com.